When it comes to our money, the goal is usually to get to a good place financially. However, some of the decisions that we make can actually end up slowing our progress, or it can throw us back a few steps. And some of these decisions may seem smart on the surface, but in the long run, they end up doing more harm than good. So in today's video, we're gonna look at some money moves that aren't always so smart depending on your circumstances. But before we get into the video, if you are new here, welcome. I create videos on money and personal finance topics. So if you like videos like this and you wanna see more, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. The first money move that isn't always so smart is co-signing a loan. And in the lending world, this is a very common practice, and it involves using your credit to help somebody else get credit. And it's not uncommon for parents to want to co-sign a loan for their kid. It's a way to help them establish their credit history. But even though it's really nice to help somebody jumpstart their credit, co-signing can be very dangerous. Now, I will say I do feel a little bit like a hypocrite by discouraging co-signing, because when I was younger, my father, he did co-sign for me to get a car, and our situation, it turned out well. Nobody's credit was damaged, but the reality is there are so many co-signing stories, and the situation, it doesn't always work out for everyone. And when co-signing doesn't work out, it's usually the person who put their name and credit on the line that suffers the most damage, because when you co-sign a loan, you are not a silent partner. It's not like you put your name on the loan application and you don't have to think about the loan ever again. Now, if everything goes well and the primary signer is responsible, you will never have to make a loan payment. However, when you co-sign a loan, you basically agree to take over that debt if the primary signer defaults. But even if you're okay with that responsibility, if the person stops paying the debt, you might not learn about the default until some time passes. And once the bank contacts you, the bill, it might already be 30 days past due, and you might already have a late payment on your credit report. Co-signing also adds to your personal debt load, because that debt will appear on your credit report. So if you go to apply for your own loan in the future, your lender, they will factor in that debt when determining your purchasing power, or rather how much you qualify for. So if you are buying a house or a car and you want to get a loan and you have another person's debt on your credit report, that can actually reduce your purchasing power, meaning you may not be able to get the house or the car that you want. And yes, some co-signing arrangements do work out perfectly. Everybody's credit is protected and the person who co-signed never has to go in their pocket. However, it is still dangerous, so just make sure you weigh the pros and cons. And remember, there is a reason why this person cannot get credit on their own. So really think about that. Ask questions before you put your credit on the line. Another move you might rethink is paying off your mortgage. Now, on the surface, it makes sense. You're able to get rid of your largest debt, you're able to own your home outright, and it's a great feeling. However, for every pro to paying off a mortgage, there are a few cons that you need to consider, because paying off the mortgage, it may not be the right move at this time. Paying off a mortgage early typically involves paying thousands more toward this debt every single month, and you have to do it on a consistent basis. And I have to say, for anyone who's disciplined enough to get rid of their mortgage a lot sooner, that is definitely commendable. But depending on your circumstances, it might make more sense to focus your priorities elsewhere first, and that includes getting rid of your debt that isn't making you any money, such as your car loans, your student loans, or maybe your credit cards, because 9 times out of 10, the interest that you owe on these debts will be much higher than the interest rate you're paying on your mortgage. Keep in mind too that the extra money that you're dumping on your mortgage payment every single month, it could really limit how much you're able to save for retirement, or you might even be able to get a higher rate of return by investing that cash instead. And if so, keeping the mortgage and investing the money will have greater benefits in the long run. Now, I am not a financial advisor, so if you are thinking about paying off your mortgage, I do recommend talking with a professional first, just to make sure that it makes sense for your situation. Another money money move that isn't always smart is paying an old debt. Now, I'm all for paying what you owe. It is the responsible thing to do. Paying a collections account or another past due account can really get a creditor off your back. However, it is so important that you are careful when it comes to zombie debt. Now, if you're not familiar with this terminology, zombie debt can include a collections account or another debt that is so old and so past the statute of limitations that you are no longer required to pay it. And sometimes this debt might have already fallen off your credit report. Basically, the original lender has stopped trying to collect the debt, and at this point in time, that old debt is probably not even hurting your credit report. However, there are collection agencies that will purchase expired debts from an original creditor and then attempt to collect the money. Now, the debt collector that purchases this old debt, they know that you are legally not required to pay it. However, they are betting on the fact that a lot of people don't know the rules surrounding an old debt. So if they call up a person or they send a letter and say to the person, hey, you have this debt from 10 years ago that you owe, we need payment immediately, they know that some people might go ahead and pay the debt or set up a payment arrangement. But one thing to keep in mind, if you have an old debt that is past the statute of limitations for your state, therefore you're no longer required to pay it, if you acknowledge this debt or even set up a payment arrangement, that actually restarts the statute of limitation, at which point you are now on the hook for that debt again. So if you get a letter or a phone call out the blue about an old debt and you haven't heard about this debt in ages, chances are you do not have to legally pay it, so do not acknowledge it. Instead, tell the debt collector to send proof that you owe this debt in writing, and a lot of times that will be the last that you hear from the company. Another money move that may not always be so smart is never using a credit card. Now, again, I can understand why some people prefer not to use credit because there's the risk of getting into debt. But I also think it's so important to just acknowledge that credit is only bad when you don't use it responsibly. I hear so much advice telling people, don't ever get a credit card, you don't need credit, it's okay to pay cash with everything, and they're absolutely right. You don't need credit. However, I feel that the advice is sometimes very one-sided because they fail to usually mention a really important point, and that's the fact that having a credit card is probably one of the easiest, fastest ways to build a credit history. And for somebody who might plan on buying a house in the future, having a credit history can make the process of getting a mortgage or any type of loan for that matter so much easier. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible to buy a house or get another loan without a credit history, because there are lenders who will work with people who don't have a credit score. However, you are likely to run into some challenges because without a credit history, the lender, they may require a cosigner, they might require a larger down payment, and oftentimes you end up paying a higher interest rate. So the decision to not establish a credit history, it can actually end up costing you money in the long run. Now, of course, everyone has to make their own decision, but one thing to keep in mind is that if you are responsible, credit can be a really valuable tool. The key is really only charging what you can afford and always paying your balance in full every month. Another money move you might rethink is saving for a kid's education. Now, it's smart because your child, they're able to go to school, get an education, and they can come out without having such a huge financial burden. However, saving for a kid's education is really only smart if you're also able to save for retirement. Some parents will prioritize saving for college over retirement, and as a result, they may delay opening a retirement account, or they may contribute very little to their account. And I get it. I understand wanting to give your kid a little head start in life. However, that decision to really put retirement planning on the back burner, it can come back to bite you. That's because there are plenty of ways to pay for college, or at least reduce the cost, and that can include going to a community college for the first 2 years, getting scholarships, getting grants, getting loans, or even working through school. However, when it comes to your retirement, there is no loan or grant that you can apply for. So if you put off retirement planning until your child goes off to school, you could really be selling yourself short, and by the time you get to an age age where you are ready to retire, you may not have enough income to live off of. So the bottom line really is that, yes, it's good to want to help your child, but at the same time, you should not save for college at the expense of preparing for your own future. So there you have it. That's my list of money moves that can seem smart, but they aren't always. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video and you found it helpful. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you like money topics and you want to see more, do consider subscribing below. I post every weekend and sometimes during the week. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in a few days.